And our top story today is the Delphi murders trial.
So we want to bring in our legal analyst, Katie Jackson Lindsay, for her insight on what happened in court today. Katie is here. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us what stood out from today's proceedings?
Well, I think the most significant thing that we heard today was the testimony from the pathologist. We now know conclusively, without a doubt, the girl's manner and cause of death. We also heard a lot about their injuries and the effects that those injuries would have on their bodies and whether or not it would have been reasonable for them to scream or fight back. And also we learned that he can't determine the time of death, which is pretty significant to both sides, I would think.
Yeah, so the coroner talked about that there were deep slits to the girls' throats and that it didn't appear that there were any defensive wounds on the girls. Why is this so important, and what can we learn from an autopsy finding like that?
Well, I think that you can sort of gather from the defense building their defense that they're establishing that it didn't appear that these girls fought back. And if this was a total stranger that they didn't know, you would expect them to fight back. It could also be that they're trying to establish that maybe the injuries didn't happen in that location, and that's why we're not seeing wounds consistent with them fighting back. Maybe they were tied up somewhere else or taken somewhere else and being held down in a certain way that they couldn't fight back. So I think we have to assume that they could potentially be going that way with those questions.
And we also heard testimony today from a woman who saw Bridge Guy on the day of the murders, and it was a quite contentious moment because that's when she testified that she saw blood splatter on him, which was a detail not in the first interview with police. So why is this important, and what's happening here in this matter?
Well, when you think of blood in the context of a murder investigation, that's a pretty significant detail. And to see a man who was muddy and bloody versus just muddy, and we heard from the defense from the questions that she said muddy at least 13 times without ever saying bloody in one of the statements that she gave. That's pretty significant. And so what I think they're trying to establish is that she's not extremely credible. The jury would have received an instruction on witness credibility, how to assess their credibility, because they don't know these people. And so they're trying to establish that you can't believe absolutely everything that you hear coming from this witness in particular.
And what's your assessment of the case so far?
Well, I think what we're seeing is exactly what we should expect from the state. Again, they're sort of building a picture, right? A criminal case is like putting together a puzzle. With each additional piece, the picture starts to come into view. So they're doing exactly what they should be doing. But at the end of their case, we should be able to see that picture in order for them to meet their burden.
I thought it was interesting what they were saying about the Bridge Guy. I mean, we've been assuming all along that the Bridge Guy is the person who was the killer, but this does kind of raise some questions about that.
It does, and that just goes back to building that puzzle. Right now, you cannot see the clear picture of that puzzle, and that's their job to make that clear to that jury because it's not clear at this point, but their case also hasn't closed.
Yeah, we're in the middle of testimony. Katie Jackson Lindsay, thanks so much for that insight. Do appreciate it.